And then I decided to add to those charges, and I brought in 4 other issues that had occurred in Valerie's case. I brought in the restraining chair incident in which the state's attorney's office had essentially orchestrated the abuse of this inmate in order to garner information out of her, using the tragedy of her baby's death as a way to do this. That was the second one. The third one was, and this is something I didn't mention earlier either, but I did mention that Jacob Gendelman had made tapes illegally of conversations he had had with Valerie prior to her being charged. And it is pretty well known, in Maryland, that it is illegal to to tape conversations between 2 parties without the consent of both. And it's illegal to make use of such tapes. Well, the state's attorney had apparently taken these tapes from Jacob Gendelman and not only used them, but actually had them transcribed at taxpayers' expense by the secretarial staff in his office or whomever, and you were going to use them at trial. And actually, one of the good things that John Janowicz did was he filed a motion to have these declared inadmissible, and they were. So the evidence that the state's attorney tried to use these or was actually using them is clear from that motion, which was granted. That was the third. The fourth was their refusal to allow Dr. Mills into the jail because lying that the attorney needed a court order, which he did not. And the fifth is a very interesting one. This is a clear-cut violation of prosecutorial ethics. You recall I mentioned that there were 2 children who had been interviewed for the prosecution, Valerie's daughter and this other child. Well, when the state's attorney went to the media, they made it sound like there were other children out there who could have been victims. And so they said anybody with information should come forward. Well, somebody did come forward. Somebody whose child had played in Valerie's house, who was in fact her daughter's best friend, sleepovers there every other weekend. Her dad, who was the custodial parent, saw this on TV and became concerned. And so he took his daughter into the Child Protective Services of Harford County for a forensic interview. We didn't find out about this until many, many months later, where somehow or another somebody mentioned that this man had his daughter interviewed. And I said, that's kind of interesting. Where's the interview? Well, the state's attorney had not turned over that interview to the defense, and for obvious reasons, because the child said nothing happened. Not only nothing happened, but that Valerie's home was a safe and warm and loving environment for children. Now, after I alerted the public defender, Mr. Janowicz, to the existence of this information, he made a request to the state's attorney for that information and heard nothing back. And that is a very specific violation of prosecutorial ethics known as a Brady violation, in which the prosecution is required to turn over exculpatory evidence to the defense. And this was not done, and not only not done, but not done after actually being asked. So the status right now is that I don't know what the outcome is going to be of the Grievance Commission's investigation. It is still ongoing, and I expect to hear soon. I should mention that the proceedings are confidential until such time as there is a finding, a negative finding. So in other words, if they decide to reprimand the state's attorneys, then that will be public. If they decide to dismiss and just kind of ignore it or say it didn't happen, then I believe that's private. But if they decide to have disciplinary hearings, which is another potential outcome, in which the case goes before a circuit court judge and both sides have the opportunity to put on their evidence and the circuit court judge decides, then that is also public. So right now we are in a waiting period to see what will happen with the Grievance Commission's findings. But in the meantime, so I think I'd like to take another little break here if possible. June of 2010, that my initial complaint went to the Commission, and this was just about extrajudicial statements. The state's attorney received notification from the Commission a couple weeks later that there was this complaint and was given an opportunity to respond. Within days, within a couple days, there was a proposal being floated around to Mr. Klein, Valerie's new attorney, to null pros the 28 felonies. Boom, just like that. Now, I should mention, just very briefly, that when Mr. Klein went to see the prosecutor initially, his first meeting with the prosecutor, he told me that he had, this was before he had really gotten into the details of the 28 felony case. He was still waiting for all the information to be sent to him. But he did say that there was a possibility that Valerie would plead NCR to the assault charges. And I guess the thinking behind that was that Valerie had been so traumatized by all the assaults that she had experienced in the jail that this may have been, he didn't say it was, but it may have been some sort of PTSD reaction. That was his theory. So he proposed that to Mr. Smith, the state's attorney, and Mr. Smith says, okay, we'll consider an NCR plea, but I need her to plead NCR on all the charges. All the charges. Now, that's unheard of. It is unheard of for a prosecutor to ask for an NCR plea in a sex offense case. That just doesn't happen. Because if it were possible for a sex offender to plead NCR, then everybody would do it. So this kind of filled in the final piece of the puzzle, for me at any rate, that the plan all along had been that this was never going to go to trial, that this was going to be Valerie being sent to an insane asylum. That was what Jacob Gendelman had wanted. That is what the public defender had hinted he was thinking of doing. You know, now the state's attorney was recommending it to Valerie's attorney, and he said, "You'll never get that." And shortly after that came the news that the commission was looking into potential ethical violations. And that is when they came with this proposal. Now, the proposal was not, you know, everything goes away. They wanted her to plead guilty to something because they had to save face. And initially, they wanted her to plead guilty to the assault and serve no further jail time, but, you know, just get probation. Valerie refused to do that. She would not. So then Mr. Klein, who was actually retained to represent her only on the 28 felony charges, not on the assault case. That was something he kind of just got handed because it happened in the time frame that he was taking on his representation of her. He said that that would be fine. He would be willing to see the 28 felony charges null prost, go away, deal with that whole piece, but that after that he was going to be off the case. And that is what happened. We went to court. It was June 30th, 2010, and the assault case was basically put off till a later date, but the state's attorney wanted Valerie to plead guilty to something, not to any of the 28 felonies, but what they did was they took one of the so-called felonies and turned it into a misdemeanor, saying that she had violated a protective order when she had sent her daughter a card, or when she had tried to have some sort of communication with her daughter. It turned out that she had not sent her daughter a card, that the mother had actually sent the card. So then they said, well, we now have some information that she sent her daughter's teacher an email saying that she wanted to try to communicate with her daughter to the teacher. So fine, they had this email. Valerie did not want to plead guilty to this misdemeanor because she felt that the protective order itself was a fraud, which it was. But I said to her that the most important thing for her now is to get out of jail, because in jail they'll continue to torture her and perhaps kill her. And out of jail, she is at least free to move around in the world and get the help she needs. And that at some later point we can come back to that protective order and perhaps deal with it in a separate proceeding, because if a protective order was obtained fraudulently, then it's invalid, and so, you know, the misdemeanor would go away. So now we're kind of into the final phase of what happened and of my knowledge of Valerie's case. So the day that the 28 felonies were null prost, Valerie left the detention center. It took an inordinate amount of time for her to check out, waited for her outside there for hours. And because the court hearing had taken place towards the end of the day, there was no time for her at that point to register with the pre-trial release office, which is something she was going to have to do since she was awaiting trial on the assault charges. So the plan was that we would come back the following day and check her in, and then we would have her pre-trial release reassigned to Montgomery County, because she was going to be moving to Montgomery County, and that apparently is something that is possible. When we arrived in Harford County the following morning, July 1st, Valerie was given a packet of forms to fill out. And among these forms was a release that she was being required to sign, giving the state's attorney or whomever, the pretrial release office, access to private medical information. Well, Valerie balked at that. She said, "Why do I have to sign this? You know, I haven't been, convicted of a crime." They said, "Well, there's this misdemeanor." So she was like, "But, why do I need to release my private medical information?" Anyway, they became hostile, angry. They didn't want to answer her question. They didn't feel that they should be required to give an answer. They said, "You just have to do it. That's it. The judge says so." The situation was looking kind of ugly, and so I went out to the car to retrieve my cell phone, because you couldn't bring cell phones into the building, so that I could make a call to her attorney to find out if this was in fact true. Did she have to sign the form or not? When I came back, they were yelling and screaming at her, and so, you know, I said, okay, you know, I've got to find somebody else to call. So I ran out to the car again, and I called my friend Michelle Etlin. I said, Michelle, what shall I do? They're carrying on here. Next thing I see, Valerie's coming out of the building, and she says, we just have to leave. Get in the car. So get in the car. We're driving back to Montgomery County, and I said to her, what happened? She said, well, they refused to answer her question, and not only that, but they said that they were now going to call the judge to ask him if she needed to sign the form, which sounded reasonable. But what actually they did was they called the judge and told him that she was creating a scene and refusing to sign the form. And he said, that's it. She's violated her pretrial release agreement. We're going to have her rearrested right now, and I'm sending deputies over to arrest her. Now, Valerie overheard this through the walls because she has very acute hearing, and that's when she decided to leave. So this was like my worst nightmare. I didn't know what to do. We came back to Montgomery County, and I spoke with her attorney, and he said he would speak with the state's attorney and they would sort things out. So fine. He calls me back and he says, the state's attorney says she must sign the forms or go back to jail, and that's all. You know, she has to sign the forms. So I'm telling Valerie, you have to sign the forms. I called the pretrial office again the following day and said, when can we come in to have her complete the intake? And they said, oh, that's all right. We completed the intake without her. The case has now been transferred to Montgomery County, and this is the person in Montgomery County that you need to contact. Well, that's what we did, and finally reached this person in Montgomery County. But there was something kind of weird going on, because we kept playing phone tag, and the woman didn't call back, or she called back, we weren't here. And when we finally reached her, when Valerie finally reached her, she confirmed that there was a warrant for Valerie's arrest. But she said that the warrant wasn't valid until it was actually served. So Valerie, we found an attorney for her to try to sort this thing out, because, you know, we were not going to have her rearrested over this stupid signature thing. While she was working with this attorney, and the attorney was working with the pretrial office in Montgomery County to sort out this problem, we received a call from an inmate from the Harford County Detention Center. And he told her that he had been hearing in the detention center officers saying that Valerie was going to be back by the end of the week, and they were planning how they were going to assault her and how they were going to actually dope her up on medication to render her incapable of fighting back. And when we heard that, then it became clear to me that this entire thing with the pretrial release and all of that was just an effort to get Valerie back into the jail so that they could complete what they had been trying to do all along, which I believe was to kill her. At that point, Valerie left my house and went to another location somewhere in Montgomery County. I continued to have email contact with her and some phone contact. And then after some months went by, I found out that she had actually left the state and had gone to some undisclosed location in another state. And that's where things are right now. I understand that Valerie is still working very hard on her defense, in getting an attorney to represent her, and we are waiting to hear the results of the Attorney Grievance Commission investigation.
Got 1 minute. 1 minute on the tape left.
1 minute left?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know. Is there anything you can think of that you'd like to ask?
Maybe something for the future, or something that this
Yeah.
can affect.
Yeah. Yes, I think that the Carlton case is very important because it points to a serious flaw in our system, in which prosecutors get away literally with murder, and where, you know, an innocent victim is actually turned into a perpetrator. I mean, Valerie started out as a battered woman, and now she's on the 10 most wanted list in the state of Maryland. It's ridiculous. She's an innocent woman.